Next up on Sanctuary, two organizations that help congregations become more effective stewards of their physical space and the environment.
Welcome to Sanctuary, bringing you conversation and stories at the intersection of life and faith. This edition of Sanctuary is produced in cooperation with the Council of Religious Leaders of Metropolitan Chicago.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Sanctuary. I'm Nisan Chavkin, Executive Director of the Council of Religious Leaders of Metropolitan Chicago. Faith communities in Metropolitan Chicago are stewards of our physical world. They're custodians of historic and beautiful landmark buildings, and they're improving our environment both locally and around the world. Stewardship can be difficult, however, for communities that face other challenges, including shortages of funds. Fortunately, there are resources here in the metropolitan area that congregations can turn to for support in this critical work. Today on Sanctuary, we'll speak with representatives from two wonderful organizations that strengthen congregations in their roles as stewards of our natural and built environments. In the first part of our episode, I'll speak with the Reverend Veronica Johnson, Outreach Director of Faith in Place. And in the second half of our episode, I'll speak with Sarah Jones, Associate Director of Community Engagement, and Emily Sajdak, Senior Project Manager of Partners for Sacred Places. To begin, I want to welcome Reverend Johnson. Welcome to Sanctuary.
Thank you, Nisan.
Delighted to have you here. May I call you Veronica?
Yes.
Okay, so Veronica, what can you tell us about Faith in Place? Just to give us a running start. What is Faith in Place all about? What's its mission? What do you do?
So Faith in Place is the Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana affiliate of Interfaith Power and Light. Our mission is to empower people of diverse faiths and spiritualities to care for the environment, environmental and racial justice, and we do so by providing resources that educate, advocate, and connect communities of faith for healthy communities.
Wow. So how long have you been doing this kind of work?
I've been with Faith in Place for about a year and a half as the Outreach Director, and it's been great work.
And Faith in Place has been doing this kind of work with congregations for how long?
For 15 years.
Wow, okay. So established and cool. So you're working here with congregations in Chicago or in the metropolitan area, yes?
Yes.
Like what? What do you do? Could you tell us?
So Faith in Place works through green teams. We establish green teams within multi-faith houses of worship. And a green team is a group of people, we like to have 3 or more, that really are the champions for environmental justice and earth care in their house of worship. And so as we work with that team then encourages the rest of that congregation, if you will, towards earth care, towards being more environmentally friendly, learning about how to reduce carbon footprint, learning about energy, and about climate change, gardening, all of the different things that make up environmental justice and earth care.
Cool. So it sounds, you're not coming in with something that's set, but it seems to be part of the ideology of Faith in Place is that you're really partners with these congregations, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And are they all next to each other? Or are you partners with people? How does it
across
how they find you?
multi-regions, across all of Illinois and certainly across Chicago. Faith in Place has 5 areas where we focus. And so there's climate change and energy, there's water, there's sustainable food and land use, there's youth empowerment, and then there's advocacy. And so we have a principle, get in where you fit in. So as we engage with the house of worship, what among those areas interests you? Are you interested in gardening? Are you interested in making sure that you're building, that you reduce the carbon footprint of your building? What are the things you're interested in? We then apply our resources and other resources that are available both federally and within the state to help houses of worship be better stewards of the earth.
So resources, one of those magic words for congregations.
Absolutely.
Is that cold hard cash? Is that knowledge? What can Faith in Place bring to a congregation that cares about these issues?
Absolutely, all of that and more. It could be grants for solar, for example, for solar installation. It could be funding for gardening. Many houses of worship, as we know, have food pantries, and they also have gardens, and they are producing food that can then be provided to their communities. We do energy audits where we bring specialists who can come walk that entire facility and give feedback to that congregation, to that green team, for example, about things they can do to reduce their carbon footprint, and then find funding that help them carry out those projects.
Tremendous. So do you have to be a big congregation to do this? A little congregation? Does it matter?
It doesn't matter. We engage with all size congregations and all faiths and spiritualities.
And all over the metropolitan area too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So, because one of the intriguing and important parts of Faith in Place that I saw was this Star Wars principle, the Jedi concept,
Yes.
which, if I get this right, is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So what does that mean on the ground? How does that work?
Well, first of all, we focus on our staff. We want to make sure that our staff, that they are prepared to engage people of different ethnicities, people of different faiths, and that they understand the justice issues that many of our houses of worship and communities are dealing with. And so they understand not only environmentalism, but they understand environmental injustice, environmental racism. They understand how to engage with others. And so we do quite a bit of employee development. And then we also hire within communities that we serve. And in that way, people can be authentic in their work as a Green Team coach, as they engage communities that they're very familiar with, because in many cases they were born and raised there. They know these faith communities, they know the environmental issues that are in those communities, and there's some trust that's built. And so that focus to justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, as our staff are developed in those areas, they can make sure that they carry out their programming with those same principles.
And you don't have to name names, but is there an example, like a local example, a regional example of what this kind of environmental injustice looks like, to sort of flesh it out for our viewers? What goes into that?
The first example, or current example actually, is there's the issue with General Iron hoping to relocate its facility in a community that is already dealing with some pollution issues, and people then have the health effects of that. And so we pay attention to those type of things that are happening around our houses of worship, so that people can be aware of the environmental issues in their community, so that they can engage, they can be advocates, and they can also make sure that they're being good stewards at the same time.
Excellent, excellent. And earlier you had mentioned that water was one of your big pushes. Now we have this nice lake next door. Is that what we're talking about? What do you, when you're talking about water, what goes into that particular issue?
Another great example of environmental injustice. Often communities of color suffer with flooding. And flooding can be because of disinvestment in their communities. And so
sewer problems,
absolutely.
Or lack of sewer problems, or
Absolutely.
lack of sewers, period?
Yes.
Okay.
And so rain gardens are one way. For instance, a house of worship can invest in rain gardens. We have resources for that. And then those rain gardens can help collect that water for better usage as opposed to flooding. And so redirecting water that would otherwise flood systems so that it can be useful to the community.
Forgive me, what is a rain garden again? How does it work?
So as you can imagine, as if you have major rain, water, rainstorms, rain garden simply redirects water, in this case to a garden. Sometimes people have barrels and it collects water, and then they can choose where to put that water and how to use it.
Okay.
But a rain garden is one example of intentionally directing water to a garden area that is then serving a purpose as opposed to flooding.
It holds the water better, is that
absolutely.
it? Okay, I got it, excellent. And you do this kind of work all over the city of Chicago?
Absolutely.
And all over the state of Illinois as well?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. And are there when we're looking at those different kinds of resources and angles, are you also helping congregations with advocacy on policies, or is it mostly just helping with projects, or is it both? How does that work?
It's both. So as you can imagine, as we have green teams across a region and across the state, for this example, doing projects that are meaningful to them. When it's time to advocate for a policy, and we do have a policy team that stays on top and help even create policies that we want to be approved at the state level, for example, we then call upon those green teams to say, hey, we're going to Springfield, we're going to rally, we're going to lobby. We actually did this just last Wednesday, took 4 bus loads from the Chicago area and then others beyond Chicago, and went to lobby and to advocate for several policies in Springfield.
And these are policies that the congregations all agree on? Is that how it works?
They understand what they're going to represent when we go, and we prep them. One of the things we tell them is that you don't have to be an expert, but tell your story. Tell why it's important that, for instance, there is less pollution in the air in your community, how it has affected you, if it has, and connect with your elected officials. Get to know who they are and be part of the civic process. And so it's really exciting when people do so.
And it sounds, at least from your description, that this model of teaming with local folks and identifying what areas of help that they might be looking for has had a lot of success.
Yes.
Can you share with us one or two, again, you don't have to name names, but a fun project that the congregation was able to pull off?
So there is a garden. Stone Temple Missionary Baptist Church has a garden which has been created, and really the community has been a part of that. Really has provided food, opportunities for fellowship, and to work together to provide food for that community.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Did they have their own greenhouse? I'm just curious, because
They
the
had-
growing season's kind of short here.
Absolutely. This has been for some time now, but they had the space, the property. We partnered with them and helped them fulfill their dreams of gardening and then providing food for the community in a time, particularly during the pandemic, where communities were struggling.
And your organization was able to help folks even during the pandemic?
Absolutely. With funding and with resources to provide food and gardening.
And congregations have been, despite this worldwide problem, it seems like your congregations have also managed to keep up their work of protecting the environment. Obviously, the environment isn't going to wait for us to be done with the pandemic, is it? So, but people were able to keep working on their projects.
Yes,
great.
Sure.
Oh, that's terrific. Well, with just as a send out for us, if my congregation wanted to contact Faith in Place or contact you as outreach director, how do we do that?
Well, our website is faithinplace.org.
Okay.
There you will see staff, and then you can easily find me and find my email address, veronicamj@faithinplace.org. We'd love to have conversations about starting green teams and what resources we have that meet the needs of houses of worship.
Great. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Reverend Johnson. And in a moment, we'll learn about another great organization that offers terrific resources for congregations here in our area. We'll be right back.
Metropolitan Chicago is one of the most religiously diverse areas in the world, and for more than a half-century, Sanctuary has reported and reflected on our faith-filled community. Sanctuary tells stories of faith from both inside our houses of worship to the streets and neighborhoods where faith is acted out every day with acts of kindness and concern. From food pantries to peace initiatives, from worship services to servicing the poor, Sanctuary has a proud history of reporting on the goodness that flows from our faith traditions. Watch Sanctuary every Sunday at 12 noon.
Welcome back to Sanctuary. I'm Nisan Chavkin, and today we're talking about resources for congregations as stewards of physical space in their communities. For our next segment, I'm delighted to welcome Sarah Jones and Emily Sajdak of Partners for Sacred Places. Ms. Jones and Ms. Sajdak, welcome to Sanctuary.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
We're thrilled to have you here, and I'm thrilled to share all the cool things you do at Partners with our audience. So tell us, what does Partners mean? What's your mission, and what do you do? Particularly, what do you do around here, around the metropolitan area?
Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
I can.
Okay.
So Partners for Sacred Places is a preservation organization. We were founded in 1989 in Philadelphia, but have since grown to a national nonprofit that works in all 50 states. And we are dedicated to the active community use and sound stewardship of historic houses of worship in the United States. And we really see that active community use and sound stewardship as interconnected. These buildings are meant to serve their communities, and by serving their communities, they can be preserved and maintained.
Terrific. Emily, anything else?
Yes, definitely would echo exactly
And
what Sarah said.
both you and Sarah are here in Chicago?
Yes.
We did not just fly you in specially for this segment from Philadelphia?
That is correct.
Okay,
Both Sarah
good.
and I are local to the Chicago
Terrific.
area.
And you have local projects here in the metro area, yes?
We do. I'll speak to a couple of things and then let Sarah speak as well. We operate the National Fund for Sacred Places, which is a program of Partners for Sacred Places in collaboration with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. It offers financial and technical assistance to historic community serving houses of worship across the country, but specifically here in Chicago. We've worked with places like Quinn Chapel, AME, Second Presbyterian. We've worked with Greenstone United Methodist in Pullman, as well as Wicker Park Lutheran in Wicker Park.
Cool.
And we also have several grant-funded programs that we do in the United States, mostly in the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, but we are exploring some opportunities to bring programming here to Chicago to match artists on the South Side with congregations on the South Side, so that artists can use these spaces as performance spaces, rehearsal spaces, instructional spaces. We also do consulting. We do capital campaign consulting and community engagement consulting, helping congregations figure out who might be interested in using their space and how best they can use their space to serve their communities, and then bringing the community into those conversations and into the space. And some of the folks we're working with here in Chicago now are Chicago Loop Synagogue, which is a gem in downtown Chicago. We're also working with Trinity Episcopal Church, which is out in Highland Park, and Hyde Park Union Church, which is in Hyde Park.
And so you were talking about it being active use of the congregation and preserving this building. And sometimes with some congregations, it seems like all the action is trying to preserve the building, because buildings, old buildings, particularly as beautiful and as meaningful they are to the community, they were not built with the idea of air conditioning or public heating as we understand it 150 years ago. It doesn't quite work, so they're always channeling all that money. What is on the ground? What does that kind of help look like? Say I have one of those buildings.
Yeah.
What do I do? I call you guys in. What do we learn?
Oh, we love those stories. We love working with congregations like that. Because we really want congregations to see their buildings not as albatrosses around their necks, but as these great resources and assets that can allow them to do amazing things with their communities. And I will also say that I hear a lot from congregations, we hear a lot from congregations that, no one's going to want to use our space. Oh, it's too old. Oh, we don't have very good bathrooms, or like, oh, there's a water stain on the ceiling. And congregations are always surprised that the community will look past that and will see all of the abundance and all of the opportunities that their spaces provide, and that there is a lot actually that can be done within those spaces and with those spaces that can further the congregation's mission and also help community organizations, community partners do their work and have an impact in their communities.
So what's an example of that kind of successful community congregational partnership? What does it look like?
Yeah. So I will say that with Trinity Highland Park, which is out in Highland Park, they were looking at their building and they were like, this building is just not a great fit for us anymore. Like, we're too small, it's too big, we got to figure out something to do with it. And so they were trying to figure out like what could possibly be done here, and they were kind of listing out themselves, well, maybe we could do this, maybe we could have a daycare, maybe we could, have a, community dinner. They called us in and we helped them invite the community into the space and the community into the conversation. And the community had a lot of amazing ideas for how to use the space. And now they are using that space for children's theater performances. They are actually doing a bang-up business of like quinceañera and presentación celebrations. And they are really getting well known in the community as like a third space for folks, as a gathering space, a meeting space. And I know that they're in conversation with the Highland Park Library as kind of like spillover space for some of their programming.
Wow. And on some of your work also, it sounds like is what we might say more traditional historic preservation work, right? If our congregation has the iconic bell tower in the neighborhood, how do we keep it from falling over, right?
Yes, yes. And as we were founded, we were founded as a preservation organization. So as Sarah noted earlier, we have an inherent interest in these spaces as architectural assets as well as community assets. And so when congregations have questions around getting connected with professionals to do conditions assessments or to find funds related to their building, we can help with those sorts of questions and help direct some of those conversations as well.
So do you have a team of architects you send out to these congregations, or people you match up?
So we have something that we call the Professional Alliance, which is a group of organizations and individuals who are involved in architecture, engineering, these sorts of spaces. And those of us on staff also seek to work in those networks as well. So where we are very well connected with preservationists, with architects, with people working in those spaces. So we can help congregations make those connections as well.
That's great. Now, and one of you mentioned also the magic word of helping with capital campaign advice, which I think probably every congregation in North America will be signing up for. So how does that work? What do you do? What can we, if I turn to partners, what can my congregation gain from that process? How does it work?
Yeah, so Partners' approach to capital campaigns is much like most of our work in approach to preservation or approach to building use. It's very community-minded, right? We know that these buildings matter and that they matter to more than just the congregation that worships inside of them. And so in helping congregations kind of design a successful capital campaign, we really look at what the building means to the neighborhood and to the community, what the community's priorities are, as well as the congregations. And we help them raise their profile within their community and engage folks who are outside of the congregation to see the community benefit and the community impact that the place has, and so be able to access additional resources and funding that they may not have pursued otherwise, so that they can raise the kind of money they need to preserve and maintain these great spaces. So
in some of your work, it sounds like there have been actual community support for a particular faith congregation's fundraising effort?
Yes, we found that.
Wow, okay. And in terms of scaling us through these different kinds of models of people helping, restore the building, and then we have people reusing the building. What are some other permutations of how that community congregational partnership works? What else goes on? Are there any other ways that you've seen it expressed either here or around the country that congregations can be those good stewards of this space that they've lovingly spent their lives in?
Yeah, so I think what we're seeing right now, just kind of across the board, is a shift in how people of faith think about how they steward their space, and how they use their space, and who is a supporter and investor of that space. From a model of a building being the congregation's and the congregation's sole responsibility, to really being a community asset that the congregation stewards, and that inviting people into collaboration and partnership not only with the use of the space but in the maintenance and upkeep of the space. And that can look like becoming just a hub of community activity with lots of different organizations and individuals using the space. It can look like partnering with just one or two organizations that kind of make their homes in the space and use a lot of the space a lot of the time, and becoming kind of a location for specific kinds of programs and services as well. We're working with a congregation in Albuquerque, New Mexico that has become the home for the New Mexico Philharmonic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And we do work with some congregations who realize that the time has come to transition their buildings to new ownership, and we help them do that very faithfully and in a way that preserves the legacy of the congregation and the legacy of their mission, so that these buildings will continue to be sources of support to the communities around them.
Tremendous, tremendous. So as we looking at that particular angle, do there seem to be some partnerships that are more conducive to this kind of happy marriage of the congregation and the community around it? Is there any sort of standard model, or when you come in, do you come in, I guess, with a template, or do you a bunch of questions, or you sort of like, here's the kind of options that we could offer you?
Yeah, so the best kinds of services and the best kinds of partnerships are inherently the ones that are aligned with the congregation's mission already, right? The ones that are extensions of the congregation's mission and identity. So if the congregation is really invested in the arts, partnering with the performing arts, the visual arts, musical arts is a great way to go. Many congregations also have deep commitments to things like food security or environmental justice or racial equity. And so partnering with organizations and bringing those kinds of organizations in to use the space is the best fit for them, right? And so what Partners does is really helps the congregation identify what their mission priorities are, and then helps them identify who else in the community cares about these things and is doing this work, who can partner with you in many different ways.
Sounds like a lot of careful listening, but with really very powerful results. Which is tremendous, and we're so glad both of you are here in Chicago, even though headquarters is in Philadelphia, another lovely city. If people wanted to contact you here in Chicago, how do they reach out to Partners for your help?
Yes, I think the best place to start would be our website, sacredplaces.org. You can find Sarah's and my email addresses and our contact information there. We'd be happy to talk with you or connect you to our colleagues who might be working in the areas you're interested in.
Thank you so much. Really wonderful work. My thanks today to Reverend Veronica Johnson, Outreach Director at Faith in Place, and to Sarah Jones, Associate Director of Community Engagement, Emily Sajdak, Senior Project Manager at Partners for Sacred Places. My thanks to all of them for being our guests today. You can find out more information about Faith in Place and Partners for Sacred Places at the web links which appear on your screen. Our thanks to you for watching this episode of Sanctuary. Until next time, we wish you good health and peace.
Metropolitan Chicago is one of the most religiously diverse areas in the world, and for more than a half-century, Sanctuary has reported and reflected on our faith-filled community. Sanctuary tells stories of faith from both inside our houses of worship to the streets and neighborhoods where faith is acted out every day with acts of kindness and concern. From food pantries to peace initiatives, from worship services to servicing the poor, Sanctuary has a proud history of reporting on the goodness that flows from our faith traditions. Watch Sanctuary every Sunday at 12 noon